Good day and welcome to the Strong Ambition podcast for the 50th episode. That's right. This is number 50. Super pumped to have you here. And I'm even more pumped about this whole episode because not only is it great that it's 50th and that we've done it for 2 years now, but I'm having AJ Zeglen on again, and we're doing a full on game plan strategizing session for my bodybuilding prep. I'm doing a bodybuilding show May 20th and 21st, and I wanted to have him on again, and he's going to help coach me through it. He's going to be my nutrition coach and advisor for training. And, we actually dive into it full on. How am I going to go about this? Because we're actually going to do a nice building phase here. I'm in the midst of a building phase and doing a cut. Now, I done a show 4 years ago, and I didn't do any of that. I just kind of said, hey, AJ, I think I'm doing this. And then, he kind of guided me through it. But I was still very rookie, very deer in the headlights in that experience. And now I know what I'm doing going in. So really awesome episode here because we dive into, how I roughly think that we could plan this out. And I just have a lot more knowledge in hypertrophy. I have more knowledge in nutrition, and things have even changed in the realm of nutrition in hypertrophy. So we get to discuss these ideas, and you're going to certainly learn some stuff, especially when it comes to hypertrophy. And we're going to dive into how I'm roughly planning out when I start my official cutting prep. And we're going to plan out, how I kind of do my building right now and how I'm kind of monitoring that and how he's going to help me with it. So we go into a lot of different topics here. It's a little bit of a longer episode because we have a lot to talk about. And you're literally hearing two strength coaches that love bodybuilding just really talk about the nuanced details and the uniqueness of it and how I'm going to actually go into this prep. So you got a lot that you can learn and listen from in this episode. It's a fun one. So without further ado, here is AJ Zeglen. All right, AJ, welcome back, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Really good, actually. We're, a week out from Christmas. It's my favorite time of the year.
Best time of the year. Super fun. I love that you got the Christmas spirit, unlike our friend Rich, who apparently doesn't. And, it's just like some people just, they are straight up bah humbug. And it's like, honestly, if you're in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and it's winter, it's like, this is literally just a reason to feel good. I'm fine with that,
Totally. I agree, man. I feel the same way. I'm like, why wouldn't you like it?
Yeah. It's like and if you can't like it, I understand that there's stresses that go in with it, but if you can't like it, then that's just literally like you're just asking to be miserable because there's reasons to feel good. Anyways. Yeah. So more on the point why you're here today, sir. We are here for a game planning session. I'm so pumped for this because, going into another prep here and you helped me with my first one. This one is far less impromptu. I'm not sure if you remember last time we did this. It was basically, this was when I first started seeing Angelina. And I had one little conversation. I was thinking about it, and I saw this kind of smile in her eyes where she was curious about it, and it inspired me. Then I talked to you, and then within a month later, we were doing a prep. So there was no building phase. There was nothing. I was just in it. And now this has been well thought out, built for a few years. So we're going to really try to dive into this. And you're quite passionate about bodybuilding yourself as well, right?
I am. You know what? I think I just like growing up, my first introduction, obviously, to working out in general was Arnold Schwarzenegger and watching all his movies, being a kid, growing up in the 80s, right? And then from there, there's no internet, there's no social media or anything like that. So like, I remember like every month, like waiting for the new issue of like Muscle and Fitness or Flex magazine to come out and just like flip through the pages and see all these guys. And I think that was kind of my first introduction, although I, shifted as I got older into training as an athlete for myself, like playing football and basketball and different sports. But it initially started like many people, right? Just like seeing these guys like Schwarzenegger and stuff in the magazines and just wanting to be like that. And so going to the gym and, trying to follow their programs that they would be in the muscle mags and stuff like that. And and that's kind of how it all started. I've just been passionate about the sport ever since. Like obviously it was just the Olympia this weekend. Mm-hmm. So I watched that, which was like I think it was one of the most exciting Olympias I've ever watched. I just felt like the field was never been so wide open before. Like just going into the show, you had Big Ramy, who won the last 2 years in a row, finished fifth, which
Wow.
I feel like you hardly see something like that happen,
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really exciting. And then obviously I'm a big Chris Bumstead fan. Obviously I love the classic physique category. He's a Canadian guy,
Yeah.
and I feel like he just represents bodybuilding so well. So to see him win his fourth title in a row is pretty exciting. And yeah, I love the whole thing. And as we've discussed before, I feel like I've done quite a few different things within the training world, as far as like strongman competitions and marathons, and playing a multitude of different sports, and kind of all over the map. And I can honestly say bodybuilding was one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging thing I've ever trained for in my life, So once you kind of go through that too, not only have you're not only a fan of the sport, but now it also helps you kind of develop a respect of the sport and the discipline of it, right? So it kind of allows you to come at it from a slightly different angle, which just made me appreciate it even more,
Well, that's exactly what happened with me going through that whole challenge. And you have an idea of what's hard, but until you feel what's hard, you really don't, and like
Right.
when it was probably one of the best moments when I was training, and it was like probably a month or two into it. And I just remember seeing like how hard it was. And you just looked at me so dead straight in the eye and you go, oh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And so I was like, thank God, because this fucking sucks. And like, because like the interesting thing though about bodybuilding is you hear some people talk about like the cut and the prep and how hard it is.
Yeah.
Now, I also do imagine a good portion of those guys on steroids and using substances, it does become significantly easier. It's still hard. Like you're still starving your body, but there tends to be a lot more from my outside experience until I got into it and listened to it more. You hear more people talk about the build, about how this builds, or, the posing, all that stuff. And everyone knows that the cut's hard, but you don't hear the guys talk about just how hard it is.
Right.
And I also I listened to Mike Isotel talk about it more recently. And I think because they become numb to that, right? Like it is so initially so discomforting that it's kind of like a good analogy for boxing, getting punched in the head. It's like the first time you start getting punched in the face, you're like, holy shit, someone's trying to kill me or something like that. And then eventually it's like, yeah, you get hit hard. It's like, it's just a part of the whole thing. Yeah, you got to breathe heavy. There's just certain parts of the experience of a sport or of a challenge that you just know that's what it is. So you don't continue to talk about how hard it is,
right?
Unless someone brings it up, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I imagine the more you do it, like you said, you become a little desensitized to it almost, right? Just becomes normal, becomes part of the process that most people kind of fall in love with if they choose to stay in the sport, right? So it is difficult though. It is difficult. That's funny. I remember that conversation that you brought up actually when we were, and I was like, yeah, this is the hardest thing I've ever trained for. Like, is no doubt, man. It's like so consuming, right? Because it's like a 24/7 thing, right?
Yeah, it's a marathon for months.
Yeah, when I trained for other sports, there was almost very distinct parts in the day, right? Like I'd go and I'd watch, film for an hour, and then we go to the gym and we train for an hour. And then, I'm not going to lie, like when I was an athlete and played football, I just ate whatever I wanted. Like I wasn't worried about, you know what I mean? As long as I got in protein, made sure I got in enough protein. But outside of that, man, I ate whatever I wanted, and I didn't have to worry about like my hydration level. Like you do, but it's like in a different context. Like bodybuilding, everything's on a whole nother level, right? So obviously you want to be hydrated as an athlete, and you want to eat well as an athlete, and you got to watch film, and there's a mental component to being an athlete. But for some reason, and maybe it's because I just did it for so long that it just seemed so natural. Like it didn't seem to consume every part of my day. Right. Or when you got into bodybuilding, maybe it's because it was such a difference in what I was used to, but it just kind of seems to just like pull you in. And the cardio and the eating and the stuff like that, it's like it just consumes you 24/7, and the training and the posing and the, you know.
Well, it's like you say, it's the whole lifestyle around it. Yeah. And you put in a ton of work as an athlete, but you're doing that at ideal calories. You're not doing that like when you're going to a prep. The best description I always had for people was, let's say, and you can ask people this usually when you ask them, how do you feel for energy and just mood most days? Average person's going to say 6 to 7 out of 10. And right. I said I would wake up routinely at a 4 and just know that like I could get up to a 6 or a 7 off of a pre-workout and a really good chest pump. And then I drop right back down right after that. Like when you have the workout pump, then you feel great. And then once that's done, then you're like, oh shit, it's back to that. And it's just energy, right? Because your body's just actually trying to slow you down. And that's a big thing of it. But no, it's super exciting to do this again because, it was really funny the first time. And I'm still saying this again in my head. It's like, one and done. And then you get there and it's like, yeah, I got to do that better. I want to do it better. And the analogy I had for people was, if you talk to someone who climbs mountains, and to me, it honestly sounds fucking insane to climb a mountain. Like right. What's so appealing to that? You got these jagged edges. You could literally die. The air's got to be super thin up there, and they're aware of all those things. But the one thing that you don't get to experience is the breathtaking view up there. Even though there's barely air, you're amazed at what you've accomplished and what you get to see. And that's exactly what it's like for bodybuilding. You fucking suffer. And then when you see yourself and you get to that stage and you said, I fucking traveled this, holy shit, what a rush. Like it's an indescribable thing. Only thing you can compare it to is other extreme competitions, like even a marathon, climbing mountains, like just things like that to that nature. And I always just try to encourage people to recognize their own crazy, right? So recognize that, boxing, willing to be punched in the face, like is always crazy. People are terrified of that. The same person that's terrified of that could also feel like it's a fine idea to run for 4 hours straight and doing a marathon. Like that's crazy, So you got to embrace that crazy. And the thing with bodybuilding is like, what can you personally push yourself through? And you had talked about how the structure and the parameters, there's certain people like you and I who actually really like that, because that discipline, that structure, and this was actually what really enlightened me on it when you were talking about it before. It's like training for like a prep is all, or like the prep competition is all about training. It's all about preparation. It has way less to do with the day of event. Like there's skill and chance and randomization that can happen in the day of competition all the time. But when it has to do with bodybuilding, it's all the commitment that you get to show, whether or not it worked for the last 3 to 4 months, technically a year or so of like building muscle. So you get to show your hard work better. And in some sports, you don't get that. So that's what really appealed to me as well.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. It is unique in that way, right? That nothing's really left to chance. You're 100% responsible for how you're going to look on stage, and you're 100% in control of that. Right. So, whether you're better or worse than your last show or whatever really lies completely on your shoulders. And there's very few sports that you can say that, right? Because like you said, when there's that athletic element of a competition, there's, you're not necessarily in control of every variable, right? When you're playing some of the classical sports that you think of, like football or hockey or basketball or tennis or golf or whatever, right? So, but the thing about bodybuilding is it is unique, is you almost are kind of in control of every variable, right? You're in control of every workout, every rep, every set, every meal, every calorie in and out, everything in your posing routine, even the music that you get to pick, the suit that you get to pick, the color of your suit, your tan, what tan you use, and your whole thing. Like you are literally in control of every single variable that adds up to your performance. And that's really unique, but I think it's a great thing for some people, maybe it is, can be a little scary, right? Because now,
It's on you. Yeah.
now it's on you. Maybe they don't want the responsibility, right?
Absolutely. And the uncontrollable factor is just who else is going to show up and what genetics they have, right? And
Right.
well, also we can put a third thing there is because we are going to be talking about two different competitions that I'm going to hit. They're on the same weekend, Van Dyke Classic and Van Dyke Classic Natural. And the funniest thing that I saw posted on the story the other day for Van Dyke Natural was someone asked in the question box, how long do you have to have been a natty? And so I'm just like, you just like, and they just basically said that it's a urine test or something like that. And so I'm like, okay, so I know this is going to be a fun playing field. But
Yeah.
with that being said, and you had actually really nailed it off the bat, you said compared to yourself. And that's super important to go into. That you go into like, I just got to beat my last show, and that's the only controllable factor that I'm aware of. And because of the you don't know who's going to show up, you don't know what genetics they have, you don't know what else they've done. And if you can come back and say, wow, that posing was better, I'm leaner, I'm sharper, my delts are better, that is legitimately the whole point of this. And you just want to share a stage with someone else that threatens you, really, right? At the end of the day, it's no different than why do people show up for a marathon, right? You could track 26 miles any day you want. We do it to actually be with other people challenging themselves. We do it to be in that environment. And so I'm pretty excited for this. Let's dive into this. Let's talk about where the competition is. We right now, just for those listening, and I'm just going to quickly show this. So anyone watching on YouTube, we got a live document right now we're sharing. And I just wrote a bunch of notes down, and we're legit doing a strategy session today. We're going to do kind of more of an overarching one. We're going to peel out more details as we get closer to the official prep. But, I just felt like it'd be a lot of fun to do in the podcast. So we can talk about, the first thing is like, how far are we out from the competition? How we'd want to evolve and roughly where I think. And the big thing why I wanted to work with you is I wanted to work with a coach for accountability and support. Like it's, when I had almost done a prep during, I was trying to prep during the COVID lockdown there. And, they just kept putting off the show. So then I pulled out because it was like a prolonged extent. But it was very challenging to not talk to anyone, right? I was talking to my girlfriend about my prep, and she's like, just, smiling and yeah. I mean, it's like, she doesn't know what to say, right? But if you have ideas, cool, bro. It's like, you keep pushing. And it's like, you need to be able to bounce ideas off of someone. And I also want you to be able to make the call when they get indecisive, and it'll really help me because you've been in so many shows. How many shows you've been in again?
I've done 4
shows. Yeah. And so this will be my second one. And I'm telling myself it's my last one just so that I go that much harder, but we'll see. As you've always said, it's like, you can do this like regardless of your age, right? Like as you get older, it's like I try to like convince, like my friend Quinn will always say how like hard it is and all this stuff. I'm like, dude, name a sport that isn't. Name a sport that doesn't risk your back or your knees or your shoulders. Right. And we're playing with nutrition. Absolutely. But it's for a pretty short window, and you're doing everything else, best sleep you can, best training you can, best vitamin and mineral status you possibly can, because of how hard it is. And it's not something, the only thing I say is like, absolutely people shouldn't do it annually. But if someone wants to do it, I actually think there's a lot of health factors as well. But let's dive into this. So we got the 20th and the 21st. I'm not sure. I think I'm not sure which one is the Naturals on the 20th, and then the 21st, I believe, is the
Open.
The Open. Yeah. So and then from there we can kind of see how many weeks back we have from there, because then I want to figure out what your ideas would be for when we want to start. Okay, so I'm just going to count this out. 1, 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 from this weekend. Okay. So what, like, I mean, for me, I'm not an easy loser, like as
Yeah.
far as losing weight. I'm not, and we've always talked about like I have that kind of metabolic disadvantage. My advantage is that I can build more than most, but
Yeah.
with that,
And your overall structure, I think, like if you look at the width of your shoulders and your back, the thickness of your chest and different things like that, there's definitely some genetic structures and stuff that people have that lends obviously well to the sport of bodybuilding. I think you do have a lot of those components, like just the way that you're built and shaped is a distinct advantage.
I
But sorry,
appreciate.
keep going. Just wanted to pump your tires there a bit.
I appreciate it. And it's true because, like, you know, that was like a dawning thing on me when I was doing the first prep. I remember going to sleep one day. I'm like, man, I just got to get lean. Like, that is just, that's my disadvantage. Like, other guys might not have the genetics. And if I get lean, that's going to be like lean into your weakness. Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, even right now, like I was ballparking for a 16-week prep, roughly.
Yeah.
And because last time I think it ended up being 13 or 14 weeks. I also know that like I wasn't accountable to step count. I wasn't accountable to you know, really paying attention to the how active I was, which I think was a huge detriment. But I think 16 weeks is enough where I can be like actually ease into the process. And then, you know, within the last 8 weeks, go harder, kind of like we had talked about, is, you know, you do aggressive calories in a shorter window for yourself. Like your last competition was 8 or 9 weeks.
I've used an 8 week on every show I've done, except for the time that I went to nationals, because it was a continue from one show into the next. So it was like an 8 week and then kind of like a few days off and then back to another 4 week, because it was only about a month later. So it ended up being about 12 weeks altogether. But I've kind of done it that way. But I don't know. It's so like individual to the person and just where they are and where they're starting at and how well they respond to things. And, you know, so there's really no kind of set weeks out. I find that works for everybody. It really depends, right? Some guy might get there in 8 or 9 weeks. Some guy might need 10 or 12 or 16, or I don't know. I know people that start all the way like 20 weeks back. So
yeah. Well, and the thing is like you had just kind of said, like, you got to kind of see where your body responds. And great advice you had last time was saying, hey, you know what? Like, you are better off getting too lean soon rather than not lean enough later. Right. Because if you end up like, hey, you know what? The show's like, and it did happen where I was having to do doubles. Like, you don't want that to be a last minute thing. You want to be able to actually, like, let's say, you know, I start the 16-week mark out and we just did my body composition. So Angelina does it with me. And I actually got to tell you about this unique way that I do my body composition with my clients you might find interesting. So you remember how when we would do the skin folds, and we would kind of get like, you ever notice how sometimes the numbers don't match the body type that you see, where you're like, this person's like, especially with females, you'd see like, this person's 28%. How is that female 28% as well? And it just didn't fit the profile, right? So then what I would do is I found this very simple, but it's not a great measurement on its own. I call it an anchor measurement because it's for males. You take your waist, your neck, your height, and then you put it into the kind of equation, and it'll give you a rough body composition. You don't even put your age in, just waist, neck, and height, and that's it. I don't think age might be, but anyway, so that measurement always anchors it and always goes high on most people. And then the skin fold is commonly low. When I team the two up, you'll actually see, I'll actually bring up my body composition here.
Yeah.
And
I'm interested to see this.
What you'll notice is there's like almost a 10% difference between the two of them. But when you look at the average, it actually makes a lot of sense. So bit of a history here for people to understand. The one day AJ had done skin folds. You did skin folds on me. Then Chris did skin folds on me. Then I did a DEXA scan almost the same day.
Right.
And so you had me at 15%, Chris had me at 17%, and I'm like, oh, well, Chris has got to be off. And then the DEXA had me at 19%.
Right.
So DEXA is just very like detailed. It's also varied. Like, I mean, your hydration status can vary on it. There's other problems with it, but it is really the gold standard right now. And so when I have some clients that have done a DEXA scan recently, I'm within 1% or 2% of it. Now, if you see here, I have body fat 1, that's always my skin fold. And then body fat 2 is always the waist, neck, and hip. Now, if you're a body type that actually holds weight in your midsection, you're going to have a really harsh second number. But it's actually okay because look at my skin folds. My skin fold can be at 9%, but my waist, neck, and hip is at 21. So the average 15 makes sense, right? And then sometimes I'll have like people who are naturally leaner. You'll actually see those numbers very close, which tells me, okay, well, we're probably very close. And so you can just kind of see most of the times 10 to 20% is the big variation. But when I do get lean and my hips are that much leaner, so here you can see I'm 9% body fat and then here 17%. So yeah, probably am pretty close to 13% body fat. Right. And so I'm going to actually test this out for myself on a DEXA scan near the end of January. My plan was to do one at the start or near the end of the bulk and then do one right before, probably after, realistically a week or so after the show, rehydrate and stuff, and to see how much lean muscle tissue you actually lose or retained. But then to also compare the skin folds to just kind of see where you're at. So right now we just did a body comp and I'm approximately with this body fat averaging system, 15% body fat.
Gotcha.
So 15%, not bad. I know for myself, I look pretty lean under 10%. And it's not that I have to get to a certain percent, but if I'm going to get under 10%, like if we actually look at this, again, I'll just point to some of my leanness on this system. I haven't been below 10% and I've done like photo shoots and stuff. I'm trying to think, the leanness was last summer, I think, around 13. I didn't always do it near the shoot because I'd be dehydrated or something, but this would probably be one of the leanest. And so if I can get below 10%, and like this is, again, these percentages aren't super important, but they're helpful, but you got to read the detail. You probably have heard like sometimes a bodybuilder could have glute striations and be at 8% body fat.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it just depends their body type, where they're holding their fat. That's the key thing in bodybuilding to always remember, right? Is that it only matters what you look like, right? No one's actually measuring your body fat or doing anything like that. So it's only important what you actually look like. So, we'll use it. Like I like using it as just like another kind of metric to help gauge process. But then at the end of the day, the one kind of variable or metric that's going to rule them all is simply how you look with your clothes off, right?
Totally.
For bodybuilding. And then because even in the context of the like when you're talking about DEXA scans, obviously the reason why they're so much higher is because they're getting all the body fat, right? Where the skin fold, the caliper measurements are getting basically what you can see. There's a very aesthetic quality to the body fat that you're finding because it's how much you can pinch. And then it's just making assumptions about internal body fat that you might be carrying around based on your age, right? So it's assuming the older you are, the more internal fat that you're going to be carrying. And so your higher body fat percentage is going to be regardless of what your caliper measurements come out right to. So it's, I guess it's like anything else in exercise. It's all just relative to what you're trying to accomplish, right? So in bodybuilding, does it matter what you know what I mean? Like if you have a way of estimating where your internal fat might be in your level or in your body, probably not, right? It literally only matters what you look like. Like it's an aesthetic sport, right? So, but I like that system that you have. It. I could see how it would be much more accurate to what you get with a DEXA, like combining those two together.
Yeah, and especially when you got the different body types, right?
Yeah.
Because like it's frustrating for me to tell someone that they're, maybe it says that they're 30% body fat and skin folds. I'm like, I don't think you are,
Right.
like I actually want them to have a bit more clear depiction.
Right.
And especially if I know someone who is like, hey, that you look like 30% body fat, like
Right.
I want to be able to give that a bit more accurately. So
Yeah.
it does help. And again, it's just more metrics to get a clear picture. And then the biggest thing I always tell people, even for more just general pop, I'm like, find the shirt that doesn't fit you right now so that we can fit it later. Best measurement tool that you can have, right? And you did. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if you've taken skin folds sometimes on someone with like a classic dad belly, and
the hard belly.
Sometimes it's hard.
Yeah,
it's like really hard, and it's almost like the fat like on that's being carried through the midsection underneath the skin. It almost becomes like it's like attached to the skin almost in a way that it's very hard to like pinch and separate, and the belly becomes very hard and smooth, and it's hard to get any sort of like pinch to measure with the calipers. And so I like the idea of how you, like, obviously this is now outside the scope of bodybuilding, but just in general health and fitness, I like then how you just take the waist measurement, circumference measurement, or girth measurement into the equation, because situations like that, obviously that can be really helpful, right? And then still at the end of the day, as long as they have a number to work with, and that number improves, then however accurate or not accurate that may be, then, because people will ask all the time, like, what's the best body fat to do? I'm like, well, I don't just do the same one all the time. Whichever one you choose to track it, do the same one. And if it moves in a positive direction, you're probably getting better.
You're doing better. Yeah. It matters more for the just consistent tool. I mean, you did mention, looking at the aesthetics. So I'm going to be like trying to I had a different way I was doing my photos before, but this one is now like I don't have my legs in this photo, but I will try to consistently do these photos so we can see visual progression. I'll do kind of the classic side angle, posterior. Just overview here. I only got like one more month to build anyways. I've been trying to bring up a little bit anything. Is there anything that you see that you can only do so much building in a month? Is there anything that you see that could use specialization in the next month? From what
you know what, it would be like, obviously, the compulsory turns here are like important to see. You would really, I feel like, to give a fair assessment, you'd really want to see someone in the rest of the compulsory poses, so like it's in classic that you're competing in, right? So you have the front double bicep, back double bicep, side chest, side tricep, and ab and thigh, I do believe.
Yeah.
Because the lat spreads when you competed.
The lat spreads are only for bodybuilding, not classic.
Yeah, they're not compulsory, so you can throw them in, but you don't have to, right? So, honestly, I feel to get like a fair assessment, we need some photos of each of the compulsory poses to see like in those, and then
with a pump or without a pump.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It honestly doesn't matter. Usually it would just be like, just like without the pump, you know what I mean? Like And, specifically just because, let's say you were to do something like an arm day, it might give us like a slightly distorted view of how the arms look in comparison to other muscles, right? So if you were going to go in with a pump, technically you'd have to go in with a pump everywhere to make it kind of relative, you know what I mean? Not that I think like it's necessarily going to make or break your whole thing if you send a couple pictures after an arm day and you got a pump or something like that, but I think like just to give the best kind of
balanced
view or whatever would just be like no pump, like first thing in the morning, like get out of bed and let's see where you're at,
Yeah. So do photos with all compulsory movements. Okay. We're going to do that.
And because as you know, too, some of it can be you know, it's relative to how you look in that pose. And there's slight variations to the poses, as you remember. Like not everyone maybe does their front double bicep exactly the same. Some people flex the abs, some people use a vacuum, some people have their legs like in a balanced like stance. Some people have a little more length to one leg. Whether the one leg is extended kind of straight out and the other knee's bent a little bit. Some people don't flex their legs much at all in a front double bi. And obviously side chest, there's the same variations. Like, are you have your hands clasped together? Are you holding the wrist? Are you, you know what I mean? What are you doing with your legs? Is your back knee like pushing out your front thigh? Or there's a whole bunch of different kind of
iterations.
Yeah. In there. So, too, it's also important to just find the ones that suit you individually the best, right? And also when you're talking about, okay, what's something that we can bring up, it would be watching those poses and how you're going to perform those poses, and then looking at the muscles in that sort of context and be like, okay, like, based on these mandatory poses and based on how you pose, even though we're posing to suit you the best, your shoulders still look small here or something like that. Like we still need to get them bigger, whatever, because you'll have some dudes. I've seen some dudes with some arms where I'm like, man, that dude has some big arms. But then all of a sudden, the way that he's built, like you'd see him with his shirt off in a bodybuilding context and like doing a front double bi, and maybe he's just so thick like through the rib cage and he has so much like circumference through his chest and back that all of a sudden I look at his arms, I'm like, man, I feel like those guys' arms actually look small now, like now that I see the whole package, you know what I mean? Yeah. But seeing this dude walk around from day to day in the gym and stuff, I'd be like, man, these guys' arms are massive, but then when you get them in that so sometimes you need the context to be able to make those decisions appropriately, I feel.
No, I really like that. So I'll get you a little video of that. I'll just do some mandatory poses this week and then we'll go over that. I wanted, because let's kind of go over just the overarching timelines and see if we're in agreement here. Like, I like the idea of 16 weeks out, but as I almost like kind of evolving the intensity and giving options for more refeeds that way, like having a refeed day once a week at the start. So kind of quarter one, 16 weeks out, which would kind of put me near the end of January, start of Feb. And my first phase there, and I know you do tend to just track the meat, but I track the calories and the meat and everything. And so my first phase, as I mentioned, was just, let's see how I can do on like a 2,000 calorie diet, 6 days out of the week with one refeed day, and do that for at least a month, and then see how with consistent activity, my activity / cardio was going to be minimum of 10,000 steps a day, but ideally probably 12,000. So that's doing a morning cardio and any other steps I can do to get to 12,000 a day. I feel like stay to 12,000 early, because, you got more energy early while having more calories, right?
Yeah.
And then go into phase 2, we can adjust from there, but phase 2 could be slightly more aggressive on the calories, keep the activity consistent. And then in phase 3, again, knock off another 100 calories if we need to. But that's where we could adjust in that last 2 quarters. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think the big part of it is just finding a place to start from, to kick off from. Mm-hmm. What you were kind of describing there seems like a pretty good idea, like just kind of on the surface, without giving it too much thought here, but seems like pretty reasonable. And then just really adjusting as you go. Like, it's just like training for anything, like even with the athletes that we work with, right? Like, you kind of have a global kind of view and plan and idea of what you want to do. But then from there, it's really broken down week to week, right? Because you might think you have the best plan, and then all of a sudden some guy comes in off the ice and he's like strained his adductor, and now you're changing everything, right? Mm. So, we might think that obviously kind of have a like something in pencil unlike what you were talking about there on how to maybe work these phases over the 16 weeks. But then it'll really just come down to how you look like every single week, right? Like you check in every weekend, whether it's like Saturday or Sunday, go through the poses and see how you look, and then just determine from there to be like, hey, does the plan that we laid out still make sense? How are you feeling? How is your performance in the gym? How do you look? Do you look about where we want you to look right now, right? Like this is how far you should be out. And okay, then we go another week, but it's possible because it's not like a linear progression. I wish it was, but as you know, sometimes it like you could be on that plan and you just won't progress like the same every single day, week to week. So potentially something could happen in there for whichever reason. Progress seems to stall, and all of a sudden we check in on the weekend and you don't seem to be exactly where we thought you'd be at. And then we got to make a decision at that point, whether to change some of those variables, obviously, whether it's to do with the food, the nutrition, the calories coming in, or to do with the amount of total calories going out, your activity levels and stuff, or in your workouts or whatever. And so it's really hard to commit for sure, like to write something in stone. But I agree, like the global, like the general idea sounds really good, but it's really just going to come down to the week to week and
absolutely
see how you look on the week. And yep, okay, this looks cool. And you were hoping for a refeed and it makes sense now. Like you look good, or people call them refeeds or cheats or whatever you want to call them. Looks good. Or you might get there and just be like, hey, we were kind of thinking about doing one because we thought you might look a certain way at this time. You're actually not there yet, so we're not going to do one. Sorry, it sucks because you're probably mentally looking forward to it, but physically the package that you're showing right now doesn't match what we had in mind for us to be able to have that cheat or that refeed or refuel, or people call them all sorts of different things now, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, anything to justify.
So we're not going to use it, and we're going to stay locked into that diet, how it is, and go, and
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And so that's exactly what I wanted to do today. We'll get the overarching ideas and depiction for myself, but to be on the right track and make adjustments as we need to going along. And like, I mean, that's kind of why I like starting around the 2,000 calorie mark, because it's semi-aggressive, but not super aggressive for me, where like I can eat 2,000 calories and I'm not miserable. And one of the things I'd mentioned to you is that like I kind of feel like there is a little bit of a biofeedback system within us, that when you're eating sub BMR calories, and this is just a theory, complete theoretical basis, but when you're eating sub BMR calories for more than a week or so, even if you're not at a low body fat percentage, your body knows that you're going to be likely heading towards starvation. Now, the reason why I throw that theory at you is because when I hear people talk about it, like Lane Norton talks about how getting to below 10% is not hard for him. It's that, last, any percentage underneath that's so hard. I'm like, well, why was it so hard for me? And then it's like, well, I mean, actually, because I dove right into the low calories. He doesn't go into low calories until he needs to. And so that was kind of the adjustment I wanted to make this time, was to see how far I can make my fat loss with good energy. And my BMR should be around like 2,000 calories, just below or higher, depending on the day. And then let's see how far that those two, I could even maybe stay at 2,000 calories for 2 quarters. If I'm losing weight consistently with maybe one refeed a day or one refeed a week, and whether and still trying to track it the best I can. I think one of the things is with the cheat meals or whatever, is like I don't always get comfortable with them unless it's a special occasion. I'd actually rather know what I'm eating. You know what I mean? I'd rather let's have a home cooked steak dinner where I can weigh that steak, I can make my potatoes, and it's fucking delicious anyways. So I don't always need to go out. Certain occasions and stuff like that. Like I think there's one, like it's going to land during Valentine's Day. We're going to go out. Like I'm not tracking that. But when there's certain occasions you can't track, it's going to be cheat meal. And basically what I encourage my clients to consider is like, a lot, 1,000 calories for that meal. A lot, like when you eat out, it is hard not to eat 1,000 calories in a meal. But if you're just setting up your calorie intake for that day, lighter meals, high protein during the day, maybe a protein shake at night, a lot of 1,000 calories for that meal. And you should probably be able to, as long as you're not just binging on that meal. Does that sound fair?
Right. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, for sure.
So that's a really good kind of like starting point that we can talk about is like, I'll probably, because I think that puts me at around Jan 20th. And so the 22nd would be the start of that.
Right.
And then with that being said, so in this next month here, because it's still technically a little bit of a build phase, I'm really trying to not call it a bulk for me psychologically, because it makes me eat like an asshole. Okay. And so I need the consistency of calling it a recomposition as much as I can, so that like I basically I keep my calories, and I'm always, this is actually a really cool thing, is being okay with coming down in your calories, even if you're in a muscle building phase, is really helpful. Because when you guys start peeling those calories back again, like, oh, fuck, oh, this again. And it's like, really, it's just psychological, right? Yep. And so like, I kind of ebb and flows my calories. So especially with Christmas coming up, lower calories during the week, I bring them up on the weekend, and I do train on the weekend. So it does lend itself to building. Right. So I'm going to probably try to continue that somewhat for the next, 4 or 5 weeks. And then the other thing I was going to say, so I'm really curious about your view on this, because even though it's just for a short window here, it's only another month or so, but I've been really taking this for hypertrophy very little. We talked about this in the gym, is that hypertrophy is more about straight sets, near failure per week, getting mechanical tension, right? So, So I want to hear your view on that. How your view may has changed. Would you keep the same? Like how do you use this kind of new knowledge?
Yeah. So what they've kind of found, obviously, in the sport of bodybuilding, the quest for hypertrophy is like the quest for speed in sports, right? It's like you can never be fast enough, and you can never know enough about it. So obviously, for a quick, like if people are listening and they're not familiar with some of this stuff, so a quick thing is going back, there used to be a lot of belief in that the main driver of hypertrophy was time under tension. So the amount of total time that a muscle was under tension. And that's why traditionally you would see a lot of hypertrophy programs being slightly higher reps, right? In that 12 to 15 rep range, or that 8 to 15 rep range, 8 to 12, people, slight variations of that. But basically the idea was that, if you do 12 reps of something, that muscle's been under tension more for a longer period of time than if you were to do 5 reps of something, right? Mm-hmm. Now, people had highlighted, and we had highlighted, we did not invent this or whatever, but, we had conversations, I remember, about hypertrophy like 10 plus years ago, where we were talking, and, and I was explaining like that the time under tension has to be meaningful. Right. Yeah. So like, I would always kind of approach it where like, okay, it's cool if I'm going to be in that 8 to 12 rep range, but I want to be as strong as I can in that 8 to 12 rep range. Cause a lot of people would see something like 12 reps written on a sheet of paper, and automatically they're like, reps are a little higher, I'm going to go a little lighter. Mm-hmm. And then you're getting time under tension, but is it meaningful? Is the load enough to initiate or activate or ignite that response that you're hoping for, right? And, because I would always use extreme examples, and I'd be like, if it was only time under tension, then we would all have super jacked legs just from walking around every day, right? But we obviously don't, because there's not enough intensity there. There's not enough of a load there, or whatever, right? To be able to do that. Likewise, on the far end of the spectrum on the other side, obviously if you had a ton of intensity to it or whatever, and you just did 1 rep, well, now you're on the other end, right? It's super heavy weight. The intensity was really high, but it only lasts like 2 seconds, right? So it's probably not, you're probably under not enough tension enough to be able to get, again, initiate that response in the hypertrophy and the growth to increase the size of the muscle. So that was kind of like the driving factor. That was the thing for a lot of years. So it was about time under tension and volume, and working at like a substantial weight, though, even though it's a little bit higher volume, so that time under tension is meaningful. And then what's really kind of come out and developed here as they keep learning more about the human body, because, if anyone thinks that we know a ton about the human body and how we build muscle and how we perform, like, we really don't. Like, in the giant scheme of things, there's so much that they discover that's new all the time, and how the body works and signals different stuff, and like, they still don't understand a ton of it. People much smarter than ourselves are out there working on this stuff every day, and it's amazing to sometimes just realize what we don't know. But anyway, what they have found, going back to what we do know, is that now they feel that the main driver is not necessarily time under tension, it is mechanical tension. And so it's the involuntary, so meaning that we don't have control over it. So it's the involuntary slowing of the contraction speed of the muscle. And so basically the best example of that is, how do you get that? And that's if you're training to failure. So if you're doing, we'll use bench press because it's probably everyone's favorite exercise. Let's say you're doing bench press, and all of a sudden, you're doing as many reps as you can, and you hit 9 reps, 10 reps, 11 reps. Now you're really starting to grind them out, 12 reps, 13 reps. As you hit that 10, 11, 12, 13, and you're just grinding out these reps, obviously the weight's moving slower, and the speed of the muscle contraction is slowing down considerably, right? Because you're fatiguing and you're moving much slower. So the slower that happens, that contraction happens, the more mechanical tension is created. But the key there too is it's the involuntary. So meaning that we are not controlling it. We're doing it because we're reaching a point of failure, of mechanical failure, where we can't do any more reps. So again, if someone's out there thinking like, well, I could just use like an empty bar, really lightweight, and just move like really, really, really slow, and I should get jacked then because the speed of the muscle contraction is going to be super slow. But that would be us doing it voluntarily. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the key there is that, so basically, for as fancy as it is and everything you want to talk about it, it's basically what happens those last couple reps before you hit mechanical failure, where you can't perform a good rep anymore, right? And that now seems to be thought to be the main driver, but that's just the main driver of hypertrophy, because everyone loves to operate in extremes. Mm-hmm. So, as soon as that came out, then the whole bunch of people were just like, volume sucks, time under tension doesn't matter, blah, 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 like rest periods doesn't matter, like all this kind of traditional hypertrophy beliefs. People just wanted to like shit all over them, right? And say they're terrible.
Science, yeah.
And so, like anything, I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, right? Like with most things in life, you're always going to have people operating on each end of the extreme. So, the way I look at it is what we were doing before in discussions that we had in the past, when we were like, hey, yeah, let's do slightly higher reps out of the classical strength training, phase where we're down in that like 6 reps and under, or 5 reps and under, but like, let's go a little bit higher. Let's work in that like 8 to 12 or whatever, but let's be as strong as we can in there. So like, we're pretty much failing on that 12th rep or 10th rep or whatever, I think our goal is. And then we've kind of created everything, right? Like, we have time under tension because the reps are a little higher. So our volume for the day is going to be a little higher. We're using a weight, like a load that's substantial enough that we're pretty much reaching mechanical failure at the top of that rep range. So we have that involuntary slowing of the muscle contraction. So we got a ton of mechanical tension. And so in a way, I feel like we were almost like using that mechanical tension as a driver to hypertrophy without us even really understanding maybe how it worked at the time. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think you always naturally kind of, like, you don't know why, but if it works, sometimes it's now the one thing that I find that was interesting to me on top of that was the set volume was more important. And that's actually what I've really changed in my routine. So, it's so funny. You end up around the same numbers. And one of the things I really like with the 8 to 12 rep range is like, you can be dealing with dangerous loads on certain lifts when you're 6 to 8 reps. Like the odds of good technique and good mind to muscle connection gets lower. And there's still even movements that I want to do 12 to 15 reps of because they're very small muscles in order to get that, postural muscles when you're doing like, rhomboids and stuff like that. I don't think I can get the mind muscle unless it's in the higher rep range. So I still kind of just pay attention to the rep range for the mind to muscle connection because that does actually correlate. But the sets near failure has been a big one for me because that's where, and I've seen people really even talk about this. You can have more reps in reserve. You're still going near failure, but more reps in reserve earlier in a program and fewer sets. And then every week I add on the sets and you can go closer to that failure. And what's really cool about this is how much more volume I can handle because I create a runway that I can run into. So it's like, week one, and I got to tell you, I'm doing like, I would not put anyone else on this. I'm doing 6 days a week right now. I'm doing a lower, I'm doing a push pull, I'm doing an arms, lower push pull arms and a day off. But I intentionally create that runway where the first week of a program, the first part of the mesocycle, is I might only do 3 sets near failure on the main and 2 on the accessory. And so that's like pretty easy for me to adapt. I can kind of feel something, but not bad. The next thing, you just add a set on into each of those. Add a set onto the push pull, add a set onto whatever leg and stuff like that. And then the week after, you're going to 5 sets. And then near the end, depending on how your recovery is, you pay attention to recovery, you pay attention to performance, and you can push a little closer to failure. But always, I still like leaving a rep in the tank because I'm more interested in putting more sets down later on in the program than I am reaching PRs. And I like literally yesterday did 5 sets of arms. And the day before I total with my chest and lats, because this is the way I kind of group it up. How many stimulative, like unnecessary fancy term, hard sets near failure for chest and lats did I get done in the week? And so if I add it up between the 2 push-pull days, and that's how I do it, like my push-pull days, I try to focus on the chest and lats. And then on the arms day, I'll go traps, shoulders, tris, bis. And on the chest and lats, because I did like, 4 sets or 5 sets of bench, 5 sets of pull-ups, and then accessory chest fly, and then another lat pull. And that's 9 sets there. Later in the week, I did another 9 sets. It's like, holy shit, that's 18 sets. And I'm not falling apart because I started at like 10 total. And so what I'm basically doing now, and I'm going to head into, because you got to plan that deload right after, and you drop all that intensity down. I still repeat the similar sequence, but it's like high RIR, like, high reps in reserve, not really even stimulative, not really finding that mechanical tension, more just light pumps. And then the week after, get back into resetting it, hitting those kind of, does that kind of formula make sense to you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like I understand what you're saying for sure. It's interesting. I love hearing people talk about other like variables that they track, and because as you know from, well, just because we've known each other for so long, like I know like you use like the RPE scale a lot, and you'll use like reps in reserve, and you'll use like different things like that, where I never use those things to like measure lifts at all, right? So, and not that I feel like one is right or wrong, as I've always said, there's more than one right way to do something, right? And so I'm always curious to see what other people are doing and how they're doing it, and the reason, and like what variables they're using to track that, the performance, and which ones they're using to like make progressions with, like from week to week, but I mean, yeah, like the underlying theme there is you're getting, especially as someone who's competing naturally, because a natural bodybuilder, like how many meaningful sets can you get for that body part in a week and adequately recover from, right? That's really the whole name of the game, right? Is how many meaningful like sets that are going to induce growth you know, going to trigger hypertrophy can you have in a week and still recover? So, you know, by splitting them up, like on that push pull, I know those are like common split or more common split you'd see in something like natural bodybuilding than you see sometimes in the open bodybuilding, because a lot of those are sometimes even just more on a granular level where it'll just be like exactly one muscle group per day.
Yeah.
But also they're recovering at a superhuman rate, right? Like
Totally.
the things that performance enhancing drugs does more than any other thing is allows you to recover faster.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think that it actually the drugs make you stronger. They don't. They just allow you to recover at a superhuman rate, and they keep you in an elevated state of protein synthesis like 24/7.
Yeah.
So you're always recovering. So you can train a specific body part isolated at very high intensity and do that numerous times like throughout a week and be okay. Whereas if you're training naturally, that's very hard to do, right? So what you just described to me, I feels like a very creative, smart way that you found for yourself that allows you to get more meaningful sets in over the course of a week when you look at a week training cycle. And like you said, you're feeling great, right? So you're having the ability to recover. So
yeah, and it's like it's 6 days a week's a lot. Like that's why I never tell someone else to do that. But I'm like,
right.
I'm you know, you can always be your own guinea pig. But like what I'm really paying attention to is that last sentiment that people always have to remember. It's not what you can do; it's what you can adapt to. If it's not adapted, it's not benefiting you. And you know, when I look at this new understanding of junk volume, or really what good volume is, and adaptable volume, and then I realize how many sets I've done in the past, and just there's probably a lot of junk volume there, right? A lot of stuff I started to pay attention to. If I don't do it twice, did I adapt to it? Right? You do it once, it was a workout. You do it multiple times, it's training. It's a different kind of end result. But so that's good that we're on the same page with this, and you agree with this for the most part. So in this next phase, and I'll send you some videos on my posing here this week. And I feel like there is some specialization, but this is something I need someone else's opinion on, because I'm like, oh yeah, maybe and then that's why everything's at high sets, because I'm like, I'm not doing enough specialization versus maintenance. And I do also still have the too many ambitions problem, which I think a lot of us do, which is like, I do still want to keep my power lifts going. So like, as you know, I got powerlifting goals. So one of the things I want to do is I want to keep deadlifting, squatting, and benching. Not trying to hit a ton of PRs during the prep, but to maintain it. And we had talked about this, which is a really cool transition here, is like during the prep, like, and I haven't looked into the literature. I think there is a piece out there by Alan Aragon. He had quoted it, that he had said that you don't need to change volume that much, but I haven't really looked into this enough. Like, what kind of volume do you think you need during a prep? As we had mentioned, like for sure more reps in reserve, but like, do I need to be doing 6 days a week? And I would say probably not, because we're going to try to have the most adaptable volume. And I feel like you want that MED, or maximal recoverable volume, as much as possible, with like the easiest form for your body to recover.
Yeah. Like ideally it's just finding that balancing spot, right? So 6 days a week, probably pretty tough. Would I say like it's impossible? I wouldn't, because we all respond to stuff slightly differently, right? And we all have different things going on, and people are all sorts of levels of how on point they are with their eating and their sleeping and their whatever. And depending on what their job is, sometimes they can't control how they sleep, blah, 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 whatever. Anyway, so, but basically it's finding that sweet spot of like when you're training, sometimes people think even in the cut, there's a certain, like, you still want to push yourself to an extent though, right? Because you were talking about your body adapting and stuff. Like if your body is being forced to do something on a weekly basis and move a certain amount of weight at a certain amount of intensity or whatever, even though you're in a deficit, like it helps that your body's pushed, because your body knows it has to do it, and your body knows that it's going to need X amount of muscle tissue or whatever to be able to perform this, right? That's part of the adaptability, right? Like if you going to a cut for a bodybuilding show and all of a sudden you really just pussy out on your training, you know what I mean? There's probably a higher probability that your body might use some of your muscle tissue as energy and it might dump some of it, right?
Right.
No matter how you're eating or whatever, because it knows that it's not being tested or pressured into performing these lifts and stuff in your workout all the time, right? So your body's smart. Your body's like, okay, well, I don't need that because I don't deadlift 400 pounds anymore. I don't even do deadlifts at all. And if I do, I'm deadlifting like 100 pounds, because someone's really like, oh, I'm just in a maintenance thing here because I'm, like there is still a bit of a psychological component to it where I feel like even in a cut, you almost, when you step inside the gym to work out, you want to have that same almost type of mind frame as if you're not in a cut. Like you're pushing yourself in the gym, right? Now, someone could listen to this and get into some of the small details of like, oh no, like 2 days out, I was only, okay, well, take the last week out, you know what I mean, from this conversation right now, and just, look at it in the context of like the majority of the prep. Like you still want to train with intensity, and doing so is going to allow you to maintain as much muscle tissue as possible through your cut. And that's obviously the name of the game. So back to the balancing act, knowing that you still want to have that performance aspect in the gym, then obviously there's certain things now we want to look at to make sure that that performance stays high, right? So in your training, if we're talking about sets, if we're talking about exercise selection or tempo selection, set rep selection, total amount of volume over the course of the week for a body part, all those things are going to come into play, right? And different people are going to be able to handle stuff differently. So it almost sounds like a very, politician or political type answer here, but I guess my answer is like, it really depends, right? Everyone's going to have a different sweet spot in which they can operate in, which they can still feel that they're recovering enough to work out with enough intensity to make sure that their body is going to keep going through those adaptations of keeping muscle, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the theory I want to play around with more, is like, maybe it's more about use intensity rather than volume, like just to find that sweet spot. And that's what I actually did find last year. I was trying to find my MED for a lot of things, and I was getting strength gains, and I was only allowing myself to be in the gym in and out in a half hour. I'm like, go ramp up, kind of a 5-3-1 style, hit that one heavy lift, and take, like really max out on your accessories and get out. And I was sustaining a lot. Now, I think it was all novel too. I think there's always these different things. Like I didn't come from a high volume or anything like that. But I think that's some of the things, the variables we can play with. And I think, but you did shine a light on kind of what I should consider in that Jan to Feb, is I shouldn't change that much. As far as like, if I'm coming off of 6 days a week for the last couple of months, I probably actually want to keep that going a little bit, maybe fewer sets near failure, because if you just turn off that stimulus tap, it's like, okay, well, we can get rid of this, right? Like you had said, like, I always encourage people to appreciate this, because they always get mad when they're like, I had all that muscle, or I had all these gains and I lost them all. It's not fair. I'm like, the only reason you get it is if you can lose it. It's adaptation. It's the only way it can work. You can't have it one way and expect it the other. It's as fair as fucking possible, because if you use it, then you get it. Right. And so that is the honest truth. And I think that's what I really appreciate about trying to discover this, is like, okay, well, you do come from a really high low, like a high volume. So there is a high demand on the body right now. And so I'm going to have to consider that evolution of, okay, maybe I do keep 6 days a week for at least the first quarter. But eventually what I truly want to do is I want to get rid of that 6 day, because I know mentally, like, to try to fit in posing is like the hardest thing for me, because posing is exhausting. Posing is tough. And it was my biggest weak link last time. I didn't know what I was doing up there, and I want to make sure I do that more competitively. So, but that does shine a lot of light. You got a hard stop here soon, eh?
People, and about like I probably go about like 10 more minutes.
Okay.
I was going to say the average person would drastically underappreciate just how hard it is to pose. I know it sounds like it, but until you've done it and practiced and been through the routine and just like cycled through the mandatories and the quarter turns and just went, it's like, it is tough. Yeah. It's tough.
One of the things that actually encouraged me, made me want to do this again, and it was a big factor for it, I've told you this before, is because those isometric holds with breathing improve my joints. So when you're doing a back double bi, it's external rotation and breathing. Yeah. And then when you go to talk to some good athletic therapists, they're like, yeah, that's actually how you improve your mobility. Right, and so we're talking about end range isometrics. And so when I was doing my posing, plus I was lightening the loads. So I will say when I did my last prep, I was not intense enough. Right. But that's actually what made it better for my joints, because I could just really loosen up and I could open up my hips, and you're doing these rotations. It's good for the hips. And so the other major thing people don't appreciate about like posing is how everything is tight. And I'm not just talking about the muscles on the arms or the chest. It is your postural muscles. It is your breathing muscles, constant tension. And the thing that even makes it, I think, more psychologically difficult is, I think, like, to a degree, you have to be very, very, very into the sport and vain enough to be enjoying that moment. And I think I don't quite have that yet. And as you get leaner, you like it more, for sure, because I'm lean. I'm like, okay, now I'm seeing the stage. Now I feel like it's more motivating. It's more motivating to do it after you've had a pump. Like doing posing without a pump is not a lot of motivation. Doing posing when you feel like your body composition isn't great isn't motivating. And like, it's the hardest part of the hardest workout to do, because at least when I'm physically doing reps, it's like strength, you're going up and down and there's movement. Isometric training is the most psychologically and like pain in the ass thing. Just
very
hold
tedious.
Hold this. It's like, okay. It's like, there's just, you need to count reps of some sort. So you got to count seconds in your head or something, because that's where we actually feel like more control. But so the posing's gonna be a big thing. Actually, it's really cool. Van Dyke is putting on a like a little bit of a prep clinic.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I did see that. Yeah. Is
so
that's coming up right away, isn't it?
Yeah, in January. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a free thing. You don't even have to like register for it. So I'm going to go to that and go learn a lot from that. Did you? I didn't actually follow up on this, but did you have any coaches that you know of that I should probably reach out to, that you can send me some info on for the posing specifically?
Yeah. So I thought like like where I learned to pose from and who I learned to pose with or whatever, was Darren Mailing is his name. They used to have a business called Freak Fitness, like based out of Winnipeg, and him and his wife Christina moved to Toronto.
Okay.
So I'm sure they have an online component for it. Mm-hmm. I have personal experience with them, where some of the other coaches that I don't. So maybe it's not a fair comparison, but I do find them to be very, very good. They're also extremely very good people, which, depending on who you talk to, like sometimes people, they don't care. They're like, I don't care if this guy's an asshole. Like, I feel like he's good at what he does. Right. Mm-hmm. I only like working with good people.
Yeah.
So, they're awesome people, and they're very good at what they do. I would be surprised if anyone has produced more like professional bodybuilders out of Canada than them. There's probably some people out there, but when you look at their list of the people that they've, you look at their running tally of people like that have placed in bodybuilding shows. Like, I'm talking like professional level, national level, provincial level, all the way down. I don't even know. They're probably in the thousands now of like people that have won shows, are coming second or coming third. Like, it's they used to keep a running tally like on their website. I don't know if they still do, but it's pretty impressive. And they come from experience of working with a lot of people, but also then competing themselves. Darren competed at the national level. His wife, Christina, was a professional, like an IFBB pro. So they're very good. So even though they're not here with us now in Winnipeg, my guess is that just with technology nowadays, I guess a lot of people's clients probably aren't in the city that they live in, right? So I'm assuming they would definitely be one I would reach out to for posing practice. I just feel that they're good, very respectable, very experienced, and good people. So you'd probably enjoy that process of working with them, you know?
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to them. I think just to wrap up on here, because I know you got to run, and we're going to continue to do these in the future. But is there any other notes that you think I should be aware of in like the next month that we haven't kind of talked about today? I mean, I keep a high protein diet, so you don't got to worry about my protein intake. I'm probably 1.2 my body weight because I'm still half carnivore. And the only other thing I'll say is I do sometimes I do like intermittent fasting currently, but I still end up distributing my protein through 3 meals, so I do aim for that. And then, is there any other notes that you think I should be kind of aware of in this next little bit before we really nuance the detail for the prep?
No, I don't think so. I would just think, obviously, making sure that you're in enough of a surplus, that you are giving your body a proper environment to hopefully keep growing, even if you feel it's a short period of time, right? So not even necessarily with the protein, but even just with the total caloric intake and with the carbohydrate intake, protein obviously gets the most press when it comes to muscle building, as well it should. But I feel like when you're looking to build a muscle, like your carb intake is almost equally as important to your protein intake. So that would be something, and we could, even talk about this offline or whatever to go into that, but it would just be something to highlight. And then, and just within the training, like I said, I would encourage the idea of every day, like taking at least like 1 or 2 of those sets to failure. You know what I mean? So so to have that, we're coming at it from that standpoint of increasing the mechanical tension, and and that'd be it to start. Obviously, just start working, like go through the mandatory poses, get pictures so you can see right away. I would do that sooner than later, right? So you could see, even though you said we don't have a lot of time, but you could even in the beginning, like if you're starting 16 weeks out, it's not like all of a sudden day 1 of the 16 weeks, your ability to grow completely leaves you. You know what I mean? Like there's still potential there to improve body parts and bring them up. And then I guess a couple other just kind of quick notes just for the people that all your millions of listeners on your podcast, aka our moms, that will listen to that. Just so, because I find that like sometimes information gets put out there and then misused. So when we're talking about the importance of training to failure, that's really like we're talking about in the context of like hypertrophy, right? And not necessarily strength training.
Not the deadlifts, not the bench press, not the squat. That is always technical failure with reps in the tank.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because there's a huge thing, because people listen to stuff, and a lot of stuff, bodybuilding is kind of like at the epicenter of a lot of working out, right? And like a lot of people that go to like of the working out world, right? So a lot of people go to public gyms, go this and that, and then they read something and they hear something, and then they're like, oh, you'll run into someone that's training for something completely different, and they just take like every single set that they ever do to absolute failure. And it's like, oh man, I thought you're training to like for a strength component to like bring your bench press up, you don't want to take every single set to failure. So if people are listening and they are wondering, that context was specifically for hypertrophy. And also, I do believe, were you saying this is your 50th episode?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations, man.
Thank you, sir.
On the 50th episode of the podcast. I got to tell you, man, I save all your stuff. Even if I don't get a chance to read or listen to something in its entirety, I just have this thing where I'm like, I love Rhyland. I want to support him all I can. I can't delete an email or whatever. So I have all your emails that you've ever sent out since day 1 saved in a separate folder. I won't lie to you and said I've read everyone, but I read as many of them as I can. And even the ones that I haven't read, I still highlight and then put them in there. So then I know that they're there for me to read. I'm like, if this guy's put in the work to produce it, like I can't delete something from him. I got to listen to as many of his episodes of his podcast as I can. I just listened to one you had up the other day with Joe Marcoux.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great episode, man.
Really good.
So I try to listen to all your stuff you can. So I just want to say congratulations on the 50 episodes, man. I think it's a pretty cool achievement.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is I have just it's a smaller audience, but I do feel like I'm a talker, and this is a medium for talking, so I can't not use this. Yeah. And so it's both like for my business, but also more of a pastime because I enjoy it. And I appreciate it. I had to have you on. You're my favorite guest to be able to banter with. And so one thought, and because you did talk about the calorie surplus thing, and tell me your feelings on this, because this is why I call it a recomp, but it is in essence, because of the way I eat on the weekends, it's more of a surplus. So it's calorie average into a surplus evolution. So basically today, no training. It's a day off on Monday. I go for a lot of walks. I keep my activity high, but I bring my calories down to about 2,000. The next day, 2,000 for, even though I do train, I keep them lower for about 2 to 3 days. And then I start to evolve. So it's like 2,000, 2022, 23, and 24. And I do that on purpose. So like Friday, I'm actually not like deprived on the weekend. I don't binge, but I do end up on calorie surpluses on the Saturday, Sunday, and I train on those days. And so on average, I know with the way I eat on the Saturday, Sunday, it's a decent surplus.
Right.
And so on average, like I think you still kind of get most of the stimulus. And I'm also, remember, like, my goal is to be building muscle, but it's not my biggest weakness, because my biggest weakness is how much body fat I automatically store. And I eat like an asshole if I tell myself it's bulk. So that's kind of like my whole context right now. How do you feel about that system?
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, it makes sense. And like I said, it's, at the end of the day, there'll be a whole bunch of different approaches to how you reach a surplus or how someone reaches a deficit. Mm-hmm. So finding one that works for you, like if this one works for you, and you'll know if the surplus is effective, because if you're getting bigger and you're getting stronger, then you're in the surplus, right? If all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, this is what I've been doing, but I actually haven't gotten any bigger or any stronger in the last 6 months, I'd be like, I don't know if you're in an effective surplus. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the fact that if you feel you are getting obviously bigger and stronger, if you're noticing benefits out of it and it's working for how you set up like your lifestyle and stuff, then I would say it sounds like an effective way to be in a surplus, right?
Yeah, I think tracking size has been tough, but it is like, because my weight will fluctuate a lot more with that style, with that eating style. But then I noticed the lower end is like, I am putting on body fat, but like the lower end is higher. So I do, and I noticed it more at the start. Now it's getting a little bit murky, whether or not I'm building up as significant. But I think what you had said, and I'm going to go to those mandatory poses, and I think getting that, it has to be a visual test. Like you're not going to be able to, and you try to create the parameters of that visual test as consistent as possible. I initially was trying to use progress photos from like the light coming out of my window, and it wasn't enough. So I have like a light that the photos we looked at there, and I'm going to do the mandatory poses on that. And we'll just try to study that to see what's coming up. And the other major thing too is, and I really do feel this, is like, you only really know when you're lean. Like you're going to have a sense of whether or not something's coming up or not. You're going to try to address it in the plan, but we're not going to know for another 2 to 3 months in comparison to the last time you saw some sort of photo similar, right?
Right. Yeah. It'll be tough to know like 100% for sure, but I think we could get, like, the thing is that even like, it's relative to the person, obviously, but even where you are right now, where you consider you to be yourself a higher body fat or whatever, I mean, you just showed pictures of your shirt off there. You could still clearly see your muscle, that you're a muscular guy. You know what I mean? So, so I think, it's like, in your case, I do believe that if we, even from this point now, if we look at the mandatory pics, like those poses every single week at a check-in, that even though you're not super, super lean now, like you would be closer to the show, I still think that you'd be able to see noticeable differences. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I still think we'd be able to pick them out, like looking at in comparison to other photos.
Okay. So you want that once a week, sent to you once a week, and doesn't matter what day of the week?
No, I would just say we'll just try to keep it the same, right? So if you're going to send them, if you want to take them on Saturdays or Sundays or Friday or whatever it is, but just do it the same every week so we know it's exactly like the 7 days that have passed in between each one, right? Yeah, same day, same time. So there's, because you might be like, oh, well, I sent this one on Friday, but then I sent this one on Sunday after I increased my eating a lot. And from week to week, so we're like, okay, well now, we're kind of, now comparing, it gets like a little harder, right? You're not completely apples to oranges, right? Because it's still you and it's still whatever, but it is get a little tougher because now you're sending them almost under different circumstances, right? So
yeah. So what I've been doing for my progress photos is on Tuesday mornings, because the Sunday meals do change. You give 1 day digestion, and then your Tuesday, and you're going to see what that week did. So we'll do the Tuesday morning. And that's what I do, because I post on my social media anyways, and I'll send you that stuff. And we'll run with it. We'll try to keep tabs. We'll keep conversation through email or text. Yeah. And I'll let you go here. We ran way past your hard stop. But
that's all right.
This has been a great chat here, AJ. And we might even do like a mid-competition episode so people can kind of see where we're at, how we progressed.
Totally.
And I'm really pumped for this.
Me too, man. I'm excited about it. And you know what? I think this might have been the first episode we've ever done together where we didn't drink any whiskey.
I'm trying to think. No, that's not true. The first one we did whiskey and barbells. We did we did it. We did one where you were in your office, actually.
You know what? I was in my office, because I think like the noise wasn't, the recording audio wasn't great because I was in my office.
Yeah. We did drink, but we didn't actually get to shoot that one. The second last one we did, it was actually a year ago that we did the whiskey and barbells.
Oh, was it? Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a year ago. It was around Christmas time. I remember, although I got pretty drunk, but it was it was about a year ago. So. But
we'll have to do another one after the show.
After the show, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. Thanks again, AJ. I appreciate it. I'll probably reach out to you so we can have some Christmas whiskeys as well.
Yeah, man. Sounds awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
See ya. Thank you so much, AJ, for that chat, and thank you for being my coach. I'm really pumped that he's going to be helping me through this. He's always been an amazing friend and mentor, so I'm super pumped to see how we can do something awesome with this competition. I'm telling myself this will be my last one, so I go all out, but who knows how many more I'll do in the future, because this stuff is really hard, but it's also really cool to see what you can accomplish. So I'm really excited. I'm excited because, a lot of the ideas I had going in were pretty on par with what he had believed as well. But he was also, this is exactly why I needed him, because he's like, well, we got to see, it still depends. We got to be willing to make changes along the way. And that's exactly why I need him, because I can get in my head a lot. I can overthink things. I can change directions. And you want to actually not do that. It's almost like, someone who drives a steering wheel nice and smooth versus erratic, someone who stick handles a puck very smooth versus erratic. That's what you kind of want your coach, is to guide the decisions and not be too erratic behind the decision making. And you've got to wait and see a lot of the time. So he's going to be there for that guidance. And I know how busy he is. That's why we were talking about me finding a posing coach. I'm going to find a posing coach, because that was one of my major weaknesses last time. But I'm super excited because, we're going into Christmas here. So I'm going to keep that build going, and the calorie surplus is going to benefit me. But, got another building phase after that. And it was actually great to hear. This is why, again, I needed a coach. He's like, you can still build in the prep. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. It's like I almost put it to aside to say, oh, I'm not building after that. And that's not true. You can still build things up, especially early in the prep. When, we talked about my calorie intake won't be so low that it'll be starvation mode right off the bat. So there's a lot of potential at the start. But the really cool thing is you're going to see this whole story play out. Like, this is going to be pretty transparent on my social media. You're going to see this stuff on my Instagram page constantly every Wednesday. I always discuss where am I at, what am I working on, and what's the strategies or what lessons have I learned in that week. Because if you think that I've just understood everything about nutrition, AJ even said nutrition and hypertrophy and everything, is like, no, you're always on an adventure to figure out your own. You're always trying to nuance it and detail it and improve it. And that's exactly what's going to happen throughout this. So you want to keep that story going, keep watching my Instagram because it's always going to be on there. It's going to be really showing you all the development. Some of it's going to be kind of rinse repeat later on, but I try to pull a new lesson for myself every single week that I train, every single week that I create nutrition. What went well? What can I do better? What needs improvement? And that's how I approach it with my clients. I dive into, okay, are we moving enough? Are we doing strength training enough? And then from there, are you doing the right nutrition, the protein intake? And then we say, okay, what'd you do good? Okay, you got to start with what your base is. Always be aware of what you're doing well. Okay, now what do we need to improve on? What's the improvement area that you need to look at? And sometimes you can just say, hey, I get to maintain that momentum. Sometimes you have to be really honest with yourself. I got to improve this. And I'll give you a little reflection for myself this last week. You'll hear in this episode, as I mentioned, that I have lower calories to higher calories, which is great. But then it's starting to get to my head on the higher calorie days that I can eat to a surplus excessively. And I don't track enough. So I know I got to be more calorie conscientious when it comes into near the end of my days. And then on the Sunday yesterday, I full on allowed myself to eat way too much cookie dough. So I just have to be more accountable in this process if that is my inherent plan. And so that's the stuff that, I'm always trying to nuance and detail and improve. And I encourage you to do the same every single week. Look at what you do well, rate it out of 10. Consider what would be a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Technically, I think we always should try to be a 9, never expect to be a 10. And so what did you do well? What needs improvement? And then create an action step for yourself. Create an action step that this is what I absolutely have to do. And for myself, my action step is to be accountable to when I'm around cookies and baking and my weakness. Track it. Like it's the simplest thing. Like, and think for yourself, oh, you're around a weakness. You're around something that maybe you might eat too much of. You don't actually have to know the exact amount. I'm not saying track it and put it in the app. You can. But I even say, I'm just going to count how many cookies I eat. Like if I do that alone, oh, that was 10 cookies today. I might not want to eat 10 cookies. And it's usually the very first step for anyone trying to make some sort of a, intervention, trying to create some change. Well, why don't you track the problem first to know how big of a problem it is? And you're naturally going to want to be inclined to, maybe I don't want to have so many drinks or so many cookies or so many, chocolate chip cookies, whatever you're trying to have, right? So just start with tracking, and that's going to be my inherent goal as I'm going into Christmas. So I'm going to make sure I track. I'm going to make sure I have an awareness of, okay, I'm at Christmas dinner. Literally, how many number of excess treats do I believe? Excess treats, like I'm just going to try to be as calorie aware as I can. Am I having? And just count it. Literally, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 is enough. And that usually is how you can self-govern a lot of these things. I encourage you to do the same. And so with that being said, Christmas is coming up. I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining the 50th podcast episode. This is really cool to be able to do. This was a medium made for me. I'm a talker, and I'm trying to become a better listener through this and having people on. And so I really am glad that you're part of this adventure with me. I plan on doing, I'm not lying, hundreds more. This is just a pastime for me when it comes down to it, because I love having these conversations and I love being able to help you through this. So I explain my journey and other people's journeys so that I can help you and reach more people like yourself throughout this. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's, and tune in to my New Year episode, which will be in 2 weeks, because on that episode, I'm going to actually, hopefully, if I have time, I'm hopefully going to review some of my old episodes. But more importantly, I want to pull some really good key thoughts and ideas so that we can help you strategize for your new year, right? Now, I'm just going to say this. Anyone who really shits on the idea of New Year's, New Year resolutions are stupid, New Year's, I don't agree with that at all. If you have an excuse to create change, create it. If you have a motivation, you have a spark of anything, and if anyone denies you of that, they are terrified of change. And I've always looked at New Year's, and it's not that I need a New Year's resolution necessarily, because I've been in fitness and training. That's not that evolution for me. But what I've always done is an overarching theme of the year. What am I willing to lean into? So I create a word or a concept. And so for the last several years, what I always had something new. One year was listen. I wanted to be a person who listened more, less of a talker. And it was really helpful for me. I still need to listen. I still need to apply that detail, but it really did help me. It helped me listen to my girlfriend when she had problems, listen to other people, listen to clients. It's less about me, more about them. And I became better at communicating that way. And this last year was honestly, the word was grind. I was trying to grind new skills and new strategies for marketing my program. And it helped because when I had moments of resistance where I didn't want to do something, hey, remember, this year's about the grind. And for this year upcoming, it's actually moving. I want to keep moving. I want to actually realize that as I'm moving forward, or as I want to progress my business, my life, my training, I only really feel bad when I'm resting excessively. I feel good when I keep my feet moving. When I actually just let's go on to the next. What's next? What's next? And I want to keep that ambitious mindset because it just helps me. Think about when you're doing cardio or conditioning of any sort. When you're like running, right? You're on the treadmill, you're running. Okay, you might feel the legs burn, the lungs burn, all that stuff, but they actually feel the worst right when you stop. So when you're running, you think of running. And so that's why I'm saying, you know what? I want to just think of moving. So this year is about moving, move forward. Just keep yourself moving, keep the momentum. And I'm really excited for this upcoming year. I'm excited for that episode. I'm going to hopefully give you some great strategies in that episode. And again, thank you for being a listener. Thank you for listening to me rant throughout all these different episodes, but hopefully it's helping you. And I appreciate the support. Remember to like and subscribe because that helps me. I really like it when you can share with other people because I do want to help other people truly and sincerely, especially if they struggle with training and nutrition. That's what we want to do, right? We want to help people with that ambition because it's about living that ambitious life. It's about trying to go after the best version of yourself because it changes the way you think about your world. And that's why next year is about moving for me. It changes the way that I look at challenges. It's like, oh, I got to move. I'm not like, oh, man, I got more to do. It's like, okay, feet keep moving. That's good. It gives me something to do. And that's such a character shift for me. And that's kind of why it's the premise of this whole podcast. That's why I really rant ambition. That's why I get people to think about, don't be afraid of the challenge, embrace the challenge. And that's why we have the mantra for this episode. It is not about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the happiness in pursuit. And I will see you next year, my friend.